Welcome. We're so glad to see you here. My name is Kyla Anthony. I'm the Dean of Student Affairs, right back over there. I get the pleasure of introducing our speakers today. If this is your first time coming, thank you for coming. If you've been here before, thank you for coming. The point of this series is to kind of step away from our everyday, what we do in our offices, the day-to-day tasks, and have an opportunity to sit together and learn some new ideas and learn from those around us of things that are important and matter to them. This is the name of the series. It's done in a TED Talk style, like you've seen any of the TED Talks, where you have just a few minutes to share about your whatever matters to you. And then we also give you guys some time at the end to ask our speakers some questions. We like to do it where they each do their talk, and then we open it up for questions at the very end. So that's how we will work with it today. So we have two great speakers today. Our first one is Matt Arnold. He is currently the Senior Support Analyst in Information Technology Services. I had to look at my paper because I would remember that title. And he has been here since October 2015. Prior to that, he was in the Army from 2005 to 2013, so for a good long while. He's from Loveland. He enjoys karate, so don't mess with him. And also is the father to 4 girls. Is that right? So he keeps very busy at home. But he's going to share a little bit about his experience, and his talk is titled Veteran Students in Higher Education, Bridging the Communications Gap. So he's going to share on that. And our other speaker is Sage Hamilton. He's an FRCC student here. His talk kind of originated in his English 121 class with Carrie Mitchell, and that's kind of what he's basing his talk off of, something he did in that class, where he wrote about his military experience in about a 22-page paragraph. Yep. So yeah, what to say. And he's taken that, he's not going to share all 22 pages with you today, but kind of refined it into this talk. He was in the Army from 2014 to 2018, so recently out. He's an avid reader and very interested in all things Middle East, and is currently a security officer at the Medical Center of the Rockies, where he worked last night on Halloween. So imagine that for a second, until 3 a.m. and still came here today to talk to us, so we appreciate that. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt to start, and then Sage will go, and then we'll have time for questions after that. Thank you.
All right, well, first, thank you all for coming. This is sort of the events to lead up to Veterans Week coming up next week, and there's several things going on. There's flyers up all over the place if you'd like to participate in any of that. So I was approached to do a speech for this series a couple months ago, and for a while I was not really sure what I was going to talk about. And then kind of the timing came up as far as, oh, this is going to be right before Veterans Week, and also right around that same time, we had one of our calzone days out in the Veterans Resource Center, where people come and bring calzones, and we had a speaker from, I think it's the Northern Colorado Veterans Alliance, and there were some interesting topics that came up in that time, specifically around some of the issues that some of the students that frequent out there have had, either in class or trying to get jobs. So I thought today might be a good time to talk about veteran students in higher education bridging that communications gap. So specifically, why did I choose this topic? Why does this matter to me? Personally, yes, I served in the Army from January of 2005 until October of 2013. I did deploy once in that time, only once, thankfully. And right now, yes, I do work here as IT. I fix this stuff like this screen. But I also am the staff advisor for the Veterans Club. And in that capacity, I've had a lot of opportunities to talk to some really interesting people. All veterans, some not veterans. That doesn't make any sense. Some veterans, some not veterans, a variety of people, about anything that they have encountered as their time as students here at Front Range, and I'd just like to share some of that with you today. So I am not a student here. I have never been a veteran student here, but I thought that this would be a good opportunity to discuss some of these things that have come up in some of these folks' time here at Front Range. So a little introduction. There are roughly 300 veterans or veteran-dependent students at Front Range Larimer campus. So what that means, they're either people who have served, are serving in like the Guard or the Reserves, or they're dependents of those that could transfer their benefits to them. So let's say you had someone that was, their father was disabled or their mother was disabled, they gave their GI Bill benefits to them so they could benefit from that in paying for their schooling. So there are about 300 folks here at Larimer that take advantage of that. Now, not all veterans or dependents will necessarily identify themselves, and there are several reasons for that. Some folks want to put that behind them. They just don't want to talk about it. Sometimes they didn't enjoy it. Things happen that they don't want to live again. They don't want to talk about it again. They don't want to think about it again. They want to think that it doesn't exist. Some just want a fresh start. They don't want anybody thinking anything about them because they're veterans, because there are things that people assume or things that people think or factors that some people don't even consider about if you're a veteran, what you may have to face. Which leads us into this next one. So what does that veteran student look like? Like everyone else. Some, it may be really clear. Tim, do you mind if you stand, can I have you stand up?
Howdy.
Okay. Pretty clear.
Yeah.
Okay. Not everyone's like that. Not everyone wears it on their sleeve. Not everyone wants to wear it on their sleeve. Or if they do wear it on their sleeve, they may not necessarily want to be approached and talk about it. They are themselves. Now, veteran students, like every other student, have their own way of doing things. They may want to just put their head down, get their work done, and just go to work. They may not be here to socialize. They may not be here to make friends. They may not be here to do anything but get their classes done, improve their lives, and move on. That isn't unique to veterans. There are a lot of people like that. Some folks just are not interested in going beyond the scope of what they're doing in school. In other words, there is no typical veteran student. We're all different. We're all people. Everyone in here is different than everybody else in here. Every veteran is different than everybody else, except for a few things where they may share some experiences. They may share some ideas. They may share some things that any other group of similarly minded or timed professionals might share. So communicating with a veteran. So this is where I'm going to talk about what's on the slide here, but I'm also going to give some examples of things that some of the folks I talked to came across and wanted me to bring up. So there's no single best way to do it. Not every veteran wants to talk to you the same way as everybody else. Not every student wants to talk to you the same way as everybody else. Not every veteran wants to talk about the same things. They may not want to talk about their deployment experiences. They may not want to talk about their job. They may not be able to talk about their job. But generally speaking, veteran folks like clarity. They like communication that is direct, that is clear and honest, because that's generally what you're going to get back. We become used to having efficiency in that communication because we may not have a lot of time for a whole lot of niceties or a lot of expounding on things. We want to get the information across that needs to get across to get the job done. Now, something I'd like to point out here, there may be topics that are particularly sensitive and impactful from personal experiences. So as you all know, our nation has been in various conflicts for an extended period of time. There's a decent chance that veterans that you would come across now, in my age group or younger, would have experienced something. Again, they may not want to talk about it, maybe they do. But if you do hit that nerve, if something comes up and they just go quiet or they just like, okay, I don't necessarily want to talk about that right now, respect it. Because you're not going to change anybody's mind and it's just going to cause problems. And by problems, I mean disagreements. It may just hinder that communication. In short, say what you mean and mean what you say. Just that simple. Now, this is another topic that came up frequently when I was talking to some of those folks. PTSD. Yes, it exists. Yes, some folks have it. Not everybody shows those same symptoms. Not everybody has need for accommodation like a service dog. Like any other accommodation, it's something that's needed for that person to function. End of story. Doesn't mean anything else beyond that. Those that do have it, those that will say they have it, they're not always on the verge of breaking down. They're not made of glass. You don't need to treat them or us any differently than you would anyone else unless someone says, hey, maybe I need to step out and cool down for a little bit. Respect it. Just move on. It's okay. We'll be okay. You'll be okay. Everyone will be okay. Because the last part on here, anyone who suffers from severe PTSD, enough to the point where it's been diagnosed, they have medication, they have other methods in place that they deal with it, they have thought very carefully if they're ready to be in a classroom with a bunch of other people. They have thought very carefully if the subject matter at hand is something that they can handle. So let them do it. This is a very real thing. This happens. People get seen as something they may not be because of something they may have, something they may wear, something they may be. It's not only veterans, but this is one that I want to talk about today, because this is actually more common than you might think. So what can veteran students offer? The other side of that coin. We have experiences that may be very difficult, if not impossible, to find anywhere else. How many, let's say, 24-year-olds who came out, they did a deployment, they were infantry or they were artillery, some other combat arms. In that role, if you're a PFC, an E3, so there's enlisted ranks and officer ranks, so you're the third rank, so not very far up that totem pole. If you're an E3 and you're a fire team leader and you have an E2 and an E1, you are absolutely in all ways in charge of them. Now you answer to somebody else, but you also are fully responsible for them when you're the highest ranking person there. That's a lot of responsibility. There are times when that responsibility could be life and death responsibility, or a responsibility of getting someone in or out of a dangerous situation. That's not something that most people are going to have experience with, and it gives a different perspective on a lot of things. So we've had that opportunity. We've been given that opportunity. We signed up for it, and we've been given that opportunity to have a chance to lead that many folks have not. To follow on that, we are generally hard workers. Now you're going to have some that are not, just like any other population, but generally speaking, we're hard workers. We hold ourselves to a high standard, and we expect especially our leaders to meet that standard because we expect it of ourselves. If we work hard, we expect you to work hard. And if we work hard and you don't work hard, maybe we'll say something. Or maybe we'll just get frustrated and we won't say anything. But the expectation is hard work is there, there's work need to be done, and we're going to do it. And we hope you will too. So final thoughts. We're people, just like everyone else. However, we may have had some experiences that other people haven't had. And that's what makes us different, is those experiences. Those times where we were places we didn't necessarily want to be, doing things we didn't necessarily want to do, but we did it anyway. Now, I'm sure everyone has been in that situation, of being somewhere they didn't really want to be, but they had to be there anyway. But we might have been getting shot at, or blown up, or attempted to blow up. Some other crazy experience that some other people won't have, or a lot of people won't have. So for the students, for those of you that have an impact on students, have any experience or any contact with students, they're here to learn. They're here to make themselves better, to better themselves so they can have a better life, just like every other student here. All we ask is we give them that opportunity. Thank you.
When I agreed to give this talk, I was convinced it was because, Kara had some students who were nervous about their 121 talk. I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll do it now. But Aaron, with you, one of the difficulties about doing this is I did this paper last semester. What was supposed to be 5 or 6 pages ended up being 22 pages. And now going back, I looked at my PowerPoint that I did for my in-class talk, and I was trying to figure out how I condensed so much into this PowerPoint. But I'm going to try my best for you. A little bit about me. I enlisted in the Army right after I turned 18 in 2014, and I enlisted as a forward observer. I went to the Joint Fires Observer course in 2016 and became a Joint Fires Observer. And if you don't know what that is, it's fine. I basically called in field artillery and close air support onto targets. That's what I did for my career. I deployed to Iraq in 2016 and Syria in 2017. One of the big problems that I had when I joined the military is I didn't really understand the wars that we were in. I understood, fighting for freedom and serving my country and everything like that, but I didn't really understand why we were in Afghanistan so long. I didn't understand what was going on with the Iraq War, why we were pulling out, why there were so many problems there. I didn't understand the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I didn't understand everything going on in North Africa. I didn't understand the Arab Spring, all the things that I had grown up with, being I was a 4-year-old during 9/11. I didn't understand why all that happened. So I started reading, and I just got really, really into the history and the economics and everything that went into Middle Eastern politics and our foreign wars. The purpose of this talk is to help you understand why we've been in the Middle East so long and where do we go from here, because it seems like we've been in Afghanistan for a while, 17 years now. Some of the important things is to understand why we fight wars. Wars aren't necessarily fought, even our wars overseas aren't necessarily fought for freedom. Most wars are fought for economics or political gain or security. And all three of those went into our wars overseas, either helping allies or helping ourselves, or even helping the locals is a big deal, is a humanitarian thing for us, and it's been one of our goals since the beginning of the Cold War, or right after the Cold War, to continue doing that. One of the major reasons we've been in Afghanistan, okay, so here's what's going on. There are 64 foreign terrorist organizations listed by the UN, and most of them have been on that list for a long time, but been around even longer, such as the Muslim Brotherhood, which has been around since the 1920s. We're engaged in multiple wars, more than just Iraq and Afghanistan. We're engaged in Syria, we're engaged in Libya, we're engaged in Mali. All those places have a US presence. So, like Afghanistan, where we've been there 17 years, why have we been there 17 years? Why is it so difficult to win? Why can't we bring our boys home now? Reason for this, the reason there's been conflict so long, you have to understand really the Middle Eastern culture. I'll get to that in a second. Arabs and Persians, they think differently than our Western views. One of the best ways, because it's hard for me to sum it up, Westerners think in one way and Easterners think in another way. I found an article by an Egyptian politician named Mohammed Nasir, and he gave a really good commentary on really the differences between Westernized liberal thinking and Eastern thinking, and I'm going to read that for you. Westerners tend to recognize and accept their faults, believing that progress requires learning from one's mistakes. Conversely, Arabs believe that chances don't come twice, and we therefore tend to capitalize on every tiny opportunity that presents itself from someone else's misstep and to deny mistakes that could backfire on us. Westerners are raised to believe in the concept of coming together to achieve success, working in groups to address their challenges. Meanwhile, Arabs tend to be individually oriented, working in zigzags, only reaching out to people when the need arises. Additionally, we Arabs generally believe that only losers make mistakes. Our pride often prevents us from acknowledging our faults. In our minds, conceding errors would categorize us to inferior society. Broadly speaking, Westerners are raised with a rational mindset that is guided by the principle of cause and effect. Arabs may use the same mechanism, but is always heavily culturally influenced by emotions and spirituality. Arabs have their own particular emotional beliefs that are quite difficult either to validate or to challenge. Yet, those beliefs continue to constitute the key driving tool of our thought process. Therefore, in order to be accepted, any message conveyed to Arabs must be molded emotionally. And that gets us to our next point. When we go over to and occupy foreign countries, we have to meet the needs of these people for them to get away from the organizations that they support or that have their support. We have to serve them as a people group better than those organizations are. This is Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. It's been generally accepted for a century now. And basically, what it proposes is that each person has individual needs that they need. Starting with physiological, that's like food, water, housing, things like that. After you have that, then you can have a sense of safety. After you have a sense of safety and security, that goes up to love and belonging, esteem, and then self-actualization, which is at an individual level. That's one of the things that other organizations, whatever radicalized government such as the Taliban or the Islamic State that they've been following, has been able to meet these needs. And when we go in and occupy a country, oftentimes we don't meet them as well. And these other groups offer them safety and security and everything that they need, healthcare, education, and they've been able to do it way better than we have. We can't, on this list, you can't achieve one thing without the other. And when the United States goes and occupies a country, we've generally only been able to make it here to here, but not any bit higher than that. Well, these groups are giving people not only security, but belonging and purpose, and using their individual talents and educating their kids and everything like that. So examples of this, because you really need to be able to understand what do these extremist groups do when they're not fighting? What are they doing for the people? Probably the best example is Hezbollah. Hezbollah came about during the 1980s when Israel occupied Lebanon, and basically the Iranians were able to use their intelligence agencies and form this group, Hezbollah, which was able to basically rise up and kick the Israelis out of Lebanon because they didn't really like the occupation there. Long story short, Hezbollah continued. They melded into the Lebanese legal system. They own several seats in their cabinet and parliament, their whole judiciary system. They own most of the school system, most of the healthcare system. They have a bunch of welfare programs, but they also operate in militaries overseas. So the majority of the armed group in Lebanon is actually part of Hezbollah, which is an independent organization. The reason Hezbollah has been so successful is the fact that they've been able to provide so much for the people there, even though they've been linked to so many acts of terrorism overseas, weapons dealing and drug dealing. There's a whole, 2016 it was discovered that there was this entire triangle of drugs or money going to Colombian narcos, which in turn sold weapons to Hezbollah so they could fund their war in Syria, which they fought with Assad and the Iranians against rebel groups and Kurdish groups. So the reason they've been so successful is what they give to the people. People aren't willing to challenge that. This slide is graphic. If you don't want to look, that's okay. This one goes into the Islamic State. My career was spent, my deployments was fighting the Islamic State. When I was going over there, I didn't understand why they had so much support. In 2014, when about 3 years after the Arab Spring happened and there was a revolution in Syria that divided the country, this radical group was able to start taking territory and keep the support of the people. I didn't know why people who are getting beheaded and there was the rape and sexual assault, torture, everything like that, how did they gain the support of the people? And the reason was they really knew what they were doing. They kind of took out, a lot of them were parts of Saddam Hussein's military who stopped fighting in Iraq and were able to get away. And they started social systems a lot like Saddam Hussein had. As soon as they started taking over territory, they came up with a healthcare system and an educational system, a family system, and they were able to attract a lot of young men who wanted a better hope for themselves to be able to get a family in the Middle East and fight for something. At the same time, well, this happened after 2014. America had learned a lot of lessons in the Middle East. They had just pulled out of Iraq, and they went back to Iraq, I think about the end of 2014 and 2015 to fight these guys. And then me, myself, we entered Syria in 2017, starting Kobani. We kind of knew better how to handle things. And this is where the United States really got better, is as soon as we started to take territory as well, working down towards Raqqa, we were able to set up a lot of systems like these really well-organized refugee camps, which may have been it was full, way more than full, but we were able to provide a lot of the things from Mosul's hierarchy: food, water, shelter, safety and security, and then give jobs and hope to a lot of these refugees and get them on refugee programs, either to get them out of the country or start their own economies in these IDP camps. So that leads me to Afghanistan, which is the real conflict. This is one of the hardest conflicts that the United States, or it is the hardest conflict the United States has ever engaged. And it's because after being there 17 years, mind you, this is a little bit outdated, the Taliban actually control more than 40% of the country now at the end of 2018. But for some reason we can't win. And the truth is it's because the people of Afghanistan support the Taliban more than they support the government that we put in place, and of course the United States occupation. This is because we haven't been able to meet the needs of the people between just basic things like not being able to provide food, water, and shelter, or destroying food, water, and shelter. The government that we've put in place there is extremely corrupt, and they know it. We didn't really invade Afghanistan because of any natural resources or anything like that, which I've heard. Afghanistan was invaded because the Taliban government was sheltering al-Qaeda operatives. As Obama put it, it was the good war, and he really wanted to win it. Just our strategy was way off, and it was almost unwinnable by the time Barack Obama took power. The truth is, with the Afghani people, they're very authoritarian-minded. They're tribal and authoritarian-minded. So what they really want is a centralized government that's going to allow them to kind of continue and be tribal. Truth is, the Taliban government worked really, really well before we invaded it. They were able to unite the people. They were able to keep heroin illegal, and were really, really good at preventing poppy production and keeping a tribal economy going and letting people figure out their own thing. The United States has tried to install a democratic government, which a minority of the people in Afghanistan support. So now, as of this month, actually, I don't know if you heard, like a U.S. general was actually shot last week, and the Taliban are getting pretty close. So the United States government has called the Taliban to the negotiating table to actually negotiate a peace process. It's more than likely probably going to end up with an authoritarian system that the people rather support with imam or a dictator of some point. And that's really what needs to happen. Culturally, that's what they support, and that will probably be what ends up in that country. Important thing to understand: there's no good guys in the Middle East. When I was over there, I was a good guy for about 5 minutes, and then people will dislike you anyways. If you're a foreign invader or occupier, that's how you're going to get viewed. Everybody has their own needs, and we all have our own purposes for being there. The wars in the Middle East aren't going to end for a very, very, very long time, and it's certainly not going to end until we really understand the needs of these people and are able to put in or foster governments that support those needs. Peace will start by implementing really Maslow's hierarchy and having that understanding in our strategy. This really requires the support of the American people, the way that we vote, the way that we talk, the way that we have understanding is going to be a big deal in putting in policymakers that understand these needs. And that means not every general is an expert on winning the people's support. Generals know how to win war campaigns. They don't always know how to relate to the local populace and install a government. So pulling out right now is not an option. At least we are keeping the wars over there, which is a good thing. But also cutting funding is not an option. We just need to make better decisions with that money. And we'll gear up for the long haul. Thank you.
Time to ask any questions if anybody has any for either Sage or Matt. Don't hesitate to throw them in the back.
I'd like to ask Matt a question. I have a question for Sage too.
Okay.
I might postpone that one and see if others have questions first. Matt, how do you think Front Range is doing overall in serving veterans? And first of all, your talk was very informative and very clear, and I really appreciated it.
So, I'm probably not the best person to ask. I'm not a student. I was basically using this as a time to talk about concerns that students had. I know that we are rated well as a school. I know that the Veterans Resource Center is highly appreciated and highly used. As far as individual instructors, I mean, that's going to vary. It varies on their own ability, their own familiarity with the subject matter, it's going to depend. I think that we have some very good support, but it just takes time. Like any other group of folks that need things different than a standard student, whatever that is, it just takes time for that to develop.
A follow-up question: is there a mechanism in place on our campus by which we can evaluate, and other than asking you because you're kind of deferring the question, learning how we're doing from the perspective of the veterans, and making efforts to improve,
So
rather than just guessing and shooting in the dark.
part of the Veterans Week programming, various things going to happen. There's going to be the vet zone training. There's going to be somebody coming from, I believe, UNC, who does this all the time. It's something he's very good at, something he knows a lot about, that will kind of give a little bit more clarity. I think as long as you're not having any major conflicts, you're probably doing okay. I mean, it's really hard to tell, because I don't think there is a rating system or a mechanism. You can't grade yourself. I mean, it's going to depend. It's going to again depend from person to person on how well you're doing with.
I'll be here almost 2 years. Me and Clausy Boy, and this is our last semester. If I can get through math, heaven forbid. But anyway, you know, it's all about communication, both with the teacher and with the veteran student. And like you said, we're all different. We all have different needs from our experiences and things like that. But you got to be very clear on what you need. I would say my godsend has been to Britt. She's been awesome at getting what I need, you know, and writing it down, or if things change or what have you. So, but to understand some of these needs and how it goes, you know. But that's just the nature of the beast, and that's, you know, that's how it rocks. But it's definitely communication from the teacher as well as the student, because you roll in there as a veteran student and people are like, oh my, here we go again, you know, because they had a bad experience or a good experience or whatever. But once again, like Matt said, we are not the same. We're all individuals just like everybody else in this room.
Thank you.
There's your answer.
Thank you.
Better than I can do.
I have a question for Sage. And so you said just before you closed there that we can't pull out. And so what's the advantage for anybody in the picture of us staying at this point?
The advantage is that we are keeping the war over there. If we were to pull out of, let's say, Afghanistan right now, the Taliban would reinstall their government, and that's what we don't want. We invaded initially because they wouldn't hand over Osama bin Laden, Osama bin Laden, because they liked him. He served with them in the Mujahideen to overthrow the Soviets, but he had 10,000 to 20,000 fighters in Afghanistan that were not part of the Afghanistan military, that were trained to commit acts of terror. If the Taliban came in, then the fear is that they would set up those training camps and start doing it again. So that's the advantage of staying there, at least until we install a government that looks like Sunni authoritarian, but doesn't foster terrorist groups. Answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question for you, Sage, too, and I'm just curious, what are your next steps looking like for you? Like, what are you thinking you're going to be majoring in, or are you majoring in? What are you going to do next?
I'm looking to major in international affairs or foreign service, so I'm applying for a few schools right now.
That's awesome.
So,
Good luck.
thank you.
Hired.
Any other questions? Well, I'd like to thank both Matt and Sage for their sharing their wisdom with us today and giving us a lot to think about. Thank you. Need more food on your way out. I'm sure it's gone.